Red Dead Redemption 2 is filled with action, adventure, and moments of breathtaking beauty, but hidden beneath its vast open world lies something far more disturbing. In the dark corners of the game, there's a chilling mystery waiting to be uncovered, a twisted serial killer, leaving behind cryptic messages and gruesome crime scenes. But what if I told you that this horrifying mission was inspired by real-life events? From the infamous Holmes and his murder castle, to Jesse Pomeroy, America's youngest serial killer, and the terrifying unsolved case of the servant girl annihilator, history is filled with real monsters who stalked the 19th century. But just how accurate is Rockstar's portrayal of serial killers in the Old West? Did outlaws and lawmen ever cross paths with real murderers like this? And did these crimes truly happen the way they're depicted in Red Dead Redemption 2?
Have you come for me? Or was this all nasty surprise? Or maybe it's both.
In this video, we're diving deep into the twisted world of RDR2's American Dreams mission, breaking down its historical inspirations and uncovering the terrifying truth behind the game's most infamous serial killer.
You should think about that. Save yourself thinking about what's about to happen.
So grab your lantern, saddle up, and prepare yourself for a journey into the darkest side of the Wild West.
It's not going to be...
It all begins with a gruesome discovery. While exploring the vast wilderness of Red Dead Redemption 2, you might stumble upon something horrifying: dismembered bodies, left as a warning, their blood painting cryptic messages on nearby rocks or a tree. Tied to these victims, Arthur finds chilling notes, messages that read like the ramblings of a deranged mind. Look upon my works. Do you see? Behold, they are taunts. An invitation to follow the killer's trail. This isn't just some random series of murders. The killer is leaving a pattern, a signature that mimics the methods of real 19th century serial killers. If Arthur pieces together the clues, the locations of the killings form a trail leading him straight to the murderer's lair. A hidden basement beneath an abandoned shack outside of Valentine. And this is where things get truly disturbing. In the shadows of this underground chamber, Arthur comes face to face with the killer, a gaunt, wild-eyed man known only as the Stranger.
It'll be fun for me, but it won't be nice for you.
Next time, avoid.
The Stranger's unkempt appearance, his eerie way of speaking, and his fixation on being seen, these are all traits eerily reminiscent of real-life serial killers. Just like Holmes lured victims into his so-called murder castle. Just like Jesse Pomeroy relished in the suffering of his victims. The Stranger in RDR2 seeks not just to kill, but to make his crimes an exhibition. And much like real 19th century murderers, he underestimates law enforcement. When Arthur subdues him and turns him into the sheriff, he doesn't resist. Instead, he's almost happy because he will be remembered, almost as if he wanted to be caught. Or perhaps he just wanted his work to be seen. But just how closely does this mission align with real history? Was there truly a serial killer roaming the Wild West, leaving cryptic messages and taunting his captors? The answer might surprise you. While RDR2's serial killer is a work of fiction, history tells a much darker tale. The American West may have been home to outlaws and gunslingers, but some of its most terrifying figures weren't robbers or bandits. They were something far worse. Let's take a look at 3 real-life serial killers from the 19th century whose gruesome crimes eerily resemble Red Dead Redemption 2's American Dreams murderer. Meet Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as Holmes, America's first documented serial killer. Like Red Dead Redemption 2's madman, Holmes was a well-dressed gentleman. He was also quite charming, but beneath his polite demeanor lurked a truly sinister mind. During the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, Holmes constructed a massive three-story hotel, later known as the Murder Castle. Inside, he built hidden rooms, trapdoors, soundproof chambers, and even a crematorium. Guests would check in, but many never checked out. Holmes lured victims, mostly young women, promising them jobs or housing. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a maze of horror. Some were locked in rooms with no escape. Others were gassed or tortured before being disposed of in the basement. But some killers didn't wait until adulthood to begin their reign of terror. Jesse Pomeroy, one of America's youngest serial killers, committed his first brutal crimes before even reaching his teenage years. Born in 1859, Pomeroy had a terrifying reputation in Boston. By the age of 12, he had begun luring younger children into isolated areas where he would torture and mutilate them. Despite being arrested and placed in reform school, he was released early, and within months, 2 more children were found dead. Like Red Dead Redemption 2's serial killer, Pomeroy didn't try to hide his crimes. When he was finally arrested, he showed no remorse, only a disturbing grin. His eerie lack of empathy mirrors the chilling demeanor of the American Dreams killer, who taunted Arthur Morgan until he was neutralized. Before Jack the Ripper terrorized London, America had its own elusive killer. In the mid-1880s, the city of Austin, Texas, was gripped by fear as a string of brutal murders shook the community. The killer targeted women, mostly servants, attacking them in their sleep and mutilating their bodies with axes and sharp objects. Just like in Red Dead Redemption 2's American Dreams mission, the murders were grisly, ritualistic, and left behind eerie messages. So how does Red Dead Redemption 2's American Dreams killer compare to these real-life monsters? It is clear that Rockstar did not directly copy a single person. Instead, they've taken the personality of the serial killer that is now familiar to almost everyone. But we have one more question to ask. How did 19th century law enforcement deal with these serial killers? And how does Red Dead Redemption 2 capture this aspect of history? Let's find out. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the American Dreams serial killer leaves behind a gruesome trail, yet law enforcement barely seems to be in pursuit. The local sheriff reacts with disgust, but there's no sign of an active investigation. This might seem like a plot hole, but in reality, it reflects a major issue of 19th century law enforcement. They simply weren't equipped to catch serial killers. During the late 1800s, crime solving was primitive. There were no forensic labs, no fingerprint databases, and certainly no criminal profiling. Investigations relied almost entirely on eyewitness accounts, confessions, or catching criminals in the act. Without these, many killers simply disappeared into the shadows. In cases like the Servant Girl Annihilator murders, police had no leads. Many officers assumed the murders were random acts of violence or the work of drifters. Since serial murder was not yet an established concept, authorities struggled to connect multiple crimes to a single perpetrator. If the police were ineffective, the press filled the gap. 19th century newspapers sensationalized crime, often exaggerating details or spreading fear to sell more copies. The American Dreams mission captures this element perfectly. Despite multiple murders happening across the region, lawmen seem reactive, not proactive. Rockstar portrays a world where crime spreads faster than justice. In real life, this was common. Take the case of Jack the Ripper. While the London police struggled to track him down, newspapers turned his crimes into a media spectacle, printing letters allegedly from the killer himself. In the US, similar reports about figures like Jesse Pomeroy and H. Holmes turned them into infamous figures long before their trials. When Arthur finally captures the American Dreams killer, The sheriff's reaction is telling. Instead of relief that a dangerous murderer is off the streets, he seems indifferent. It's as if law enforcement only acts when the criminal is handed to them. This mirrors real history. Serial killers were rarely stopped by well-planned investigations. More often than not, they were caught by accident, or they simply got sloppy. Jesse Pomeroy was caught after a witness saw him near one of the crime scenes. Holmes wasn't arrested for murder, but for insurance fraud. Even the servant girl annihilator was never officially identified. Rockstar captures this theme of historical inefficiency. The Old West was lawless, and justice was often slow. Even with bodies piling up, there was no FBI, no national crime database, just local sheriffs, often overwhelmed and underfunded. And so, just like in real history, the serial killer's reign of terror only ends when someone like Arthur takes matters into their own hands. But did Rockstar exaggerate their depiction, or is this a brutally honest take on crime in the 1800s? Let's take a closer look. So now that we've explored the terrifying depths of Red Dead Redemption 2's serial killer mystery and compared it to real history, the question remains, just how accurate is Rockstar's portrayal of a 19th century serial killer? Let's break it down and give them an accuracy score out of 5. Rockstar absolutely nailed the psychological profile of a 19th century serial killer. The American Dream's murderer exhibits behaviors commonly seen in real-life killers of the era: ritualistic killings, a desire for recognition, and an eerie detachment from reality. His obsession with being seen mirrors killers like Jesse Pomeroy and Holmes, who also sought notoriety. However, the lack of any clear motive beyond madness feels a bit simplified. Most historical serial killers had underlying reasons, whether it was financial gain, personal revenge, or twisted beliefs. Rockstar leans more into the Hollywood crazed killer trope rather than diving into the deeper psychological complexity. So, 4 out of 5. Almost perfect, but lacking depth and motive. The thing in which Rockstar's attention to detail truly shines is the crime scenes. In Red Dead Redemption 2, crime scenes feel disturbingly real: dismembered bodies, cryptic messages, carefully arranged evidence. This is exactly how 19th century serial killers operated, especially in cases like the servant girl annihilator, where bodies were left to be discovered in shocking ways. Even the way Arthur uncovers the killer's basement by following fragmented clues is historically accurate. Serial killers often had trophy rooms or hidden spaces where they stored remains, just like Holmes' infamous murder castle. A perfect 5 out of 5, Rockstar gets this eerily right. And now we are here where things get a little less historically accurate. Yes, 19th century law enforcement was primitive, and yes, many killers went unnoticed, but Rockstar oversimplifies this aspect. In reality, newspapers played a much larger role in spreading panic and demanding justice. In cases like Jack the Ripper, the police were overwhelmed, but they still made efforts to investigate. In Red Dead Redemption 2, law enforcement barely acknowledges the murders until Arthur literally hands them the killer. Finally, when we come to capturing, this part feels the least historically accurate. Most real serial killers of the 19th century were either caught due to sloppy mistakes, public outrage, or completely unrelated crimes. Holmes, for example, was arrested for fraud, not murder. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the killer doesn't put up much of a fight. He seems almost eager to be caught. While some real killers did seek notoriety, most tried to avoid arrest for as long as possible. 3 out of 5, Rockstar captures some psychological accuracy, but makes the arrest feel a bit too clean and predictable. So, how did Rockstar do overall? Their portrayal of a 19th century serial killer is chillingly effective. The psychological aspects, the crime scenes, and the investigation process feel incredibly real. However, the game simplifies law enforcement's role and makes the capture a bit too straightforward. Overall, Rockstar gets 4 out of 5 stars for historical accuracy. They blend multiple real-life cases into one terrifying mystery, but some elements lean more into Hollywood storytelling than strict realism. What do you think? Did Rockstar do justice to 19th century serial killers, or do you think they should have pushed the realism even further? Let me know in the comments, and if you want more historical breakdowns of Red Dead Redemption's hidden mysteries, make sure to subscribe.